there have been a lot of conversations online about how Christians in Israel are treated. It was most recently at the center of a combative conversation between Tucker Carlson and U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, who's himself an evangelical Christian living in the Jewish state. So we thought it would be helpful to talk to an Israeli Christian who grew up going to church and participating in ministry in Israel. Eden, thank you so much for being here. And first of all, I'd like for you to tell us a little bit about your own testimony, how you came to
Mhm.
Christ in Israel.
Yeah, so I was born in the United States. I have two amazing parents. They've always been involved in ministry. They've always been Christian, and they didn't really know anything about Israel
Mm,
when I was born, and much throughout my younger childhood, living in the United States. I eventually moved to Israel as a child when I was 10, but my childhood before then, my parents had nothing to do with Israel. They didn't know what the Bible said concerning it. They often would make the mistake of reading themselves into the portions of the Bible that say Israel, and taking that on as, oh, we are Israel now. So they had no idea what Israel was about, and then one day God called them to be a part of a ministry called Bridges for Peace,
mm.
and with that ministry, they ended up going to Israel, and they raised me and my sister there. And so, yeah, I grew up in a Christian family. My parents are evangelicals. And even though I grew up in the faith, I kind of wavered back and forth. But eventually, through living in Israel and, seeing the sites come to life, and really being able to read the Bible through the cultural perspective, I, I found faith in Yeshua, and I'm so grateful for my childhood there, and I miss it every day. I'm currently in Florida, but I miss home.
Well, speaking culturally, while most people in Israel are, of course, ethnically Jewish, my understanding, Eden, is that most of the population is generally non religious. While they might practice Jewish tradition or observe Jewish cultural rites, they're not necessarily overly religious. So,
Mhm.
what is Israel like culturally speaking? I know I'm asking you kind of to paint with a broad brush, but what was your understanding and experience culturally living in Israel?
Wow. Hmm. So yeah, like you said, not everybody is religious, but there is a bit of those religious undertones. Just like here in the States, everybody celebrates Christmas. It's a religious
Hmm.
holiday, but it's not necessarily celebrated in a religious way. So I think that the same thing can be said about the way that Israelis move about. There's a lot of everybody. Most people are Jewish, but there's a lot of mixes. There's Arabs, of course. There's different ethnicities, different ethnic groups. I myself, I'm not Jewish. I'm completely Gentile. I haven't done a blood test, but I'm not Jewish. And but it really does influence the culture of everybody there, to where that people get, even if you're not Jewish, you get certain holidays off from school, off from work. Everything shuts down on Saturday for Shabbat. So while not everybody is religious, the city, I think, does practice Judaism in a really interesting way that I don't think we see here in the States. I think we did back in like the 50s. Things would be closed on Sunday. So it's similar to that, but it really is just a melting pot of people's interpretations of Judaism.
Well, so tell us a little bit about then what ministry work was like for you, your parents, your family, doing Christian ministry work in Israel.
Yeah, so they're part of, like I said, an organization called Bridges for Peace. It is an organization that has been in the land for, I want to say, around 60 years. I could be wrong on that. I don't know everything about the organization. But they've been in the land basically building relationships between Christians and Jews. It was a very contentious subject because there's been so much Christian anti-Semitism throughout the years. And I know now we're like, what the heck? What do you mean Christian anti-Semitism? But it was a real thing. So this organization was built on mending the relationship between Christians and Jews and kind of saying, I know there were these things in the past, but Christians now who love Jesus, who serve Christ, we love the Jewish people, and we are here to basically represent Christianity in a new way, in the way that is actually true to the scriptures. And so they've been in the land basically helping Holocaust survivors,
Mm.
helping rebuild apartments, distributing food to the impoverished, helping people make aliyah, which is when Jews immigrate from other countries to Israel. And that's basically what the organization does. It says, this ministry is coming to you from Christian hands and Christian supporters around the world, and really just trying to mend that reputation.
Well, after doing a quick Google search while you were answering that, I did see that Bridges for Peace has actually been in Israel for more than 5 decades, so more
Okay,
than 50
so
years.
close.
Yeah, you were close there. And I want to ask you too about something you said on a reel that you posted to your social media, which is that you actually attended or went to the church that Ambassador Huckabee, as a
Yeah.
Christian, now attends. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so what's interesting about the messianic or believing community in Jerusalem is all of the youth they basically church hop at different youth groups. So I know
Mm,
here in the States, you go to the youth group that you attend on Sunday, right? That's kind of traditionally how it goes. But in Jerusalem, everybody's just hopping from one youth group to another. So it is a Baptist congregation. We've attended a few services. Our organization would host our Christmas party at the congregation, but we didn't. My family didn't go there for services regularly, but I did attend their youth group every week, and so that was very interesting. And then of course their Christmas parties we'd go to, and so yeah, hearing Ambassador Huckabee talk, I asked my dad, I'm like, wait, he goes to church like a regular civilian in Israel. Which church does he go to? He's like, I think he goes to the Baptist house. And did a quick Google search and found out that he did. Of course, I'd never seen him there, but because I had left before he became the ambassador. But I think that's very interesting. And interesting when he was like, I used to play the bass at that congregation. I can imagine him playing the bass at that congregation because I'm very familiar with the building.
Well, so tell us why, Eden, sharing your perspective on your experience when you were in Israel. Obviously, you're now in Florida, but why is sharing that experience so important to you now, especially given, I think, the cultural dynamics that are at play now with rising anti-Semitism, rising anti-Israel sentiment? Why is it critical to you to shine a light on what it was like for you as a Christian in Israel?
Yeah, there's a few reasons. One of them would be because I grew up my parents would lead tours. And on the tours is we'd always go to the Holocaust Museum. And I know all the groypers and anti-Semite worlds are always like, why do you have to learn about the Holocaust? But it is important. And when I would grow up going and walking through these halls, I don't know if you've ever been to Yad Vashem, but you walk through these halls and you see the beginnings of the war and the beginnings of the narratives that ended up leading to the Holocaust. And some of these narratives that I grew up hearing, I used to think, there's no way this could ever happen again. Fast forward, and I go to the Student Action Summit in Tampa, Florida by Turning Point USA. Love the organization. I love Charlie Kirk, and I'm so sad over his death. But I was at this Turning Point event, and so many of the narratives that I had heard growing up recounting, the beginnings of World War II, I was starting to hear the same things being spewed by these individuals attending the event. And so that was one of the reasons that I was like, okay, I really have to start speaking. Another thing is when you hear so many people lying about your upbringing, you kind of
Hmm.
have to say something. And there's so many people saying, Christians face this in Israel. Christians face that. Christians are persecuted by Jews. Have you read the Talmud? As somebody who grew up under Jewish, like, I don't want to say Jewish control, but in a Jewish state, all these things that people are saying, that they get this information from TikTok, it's just not true. And I have personal experience, and I kind of feel like, why would God give me this experience, and why would God allow this to be my childhood? if not to speak about it. And so that
Mhm.
is one of the biggest reasons that I want to speak about it and really enter the conversation on these issues. And I can go into detail more on certain subjects, Christian persecution in Israel, or the war and all these things. But really, that is the basis on why I choose to speak.
Well, Eden, tell us a little bit about how your understanding of Jewish culture, of even the Jewish roots of our Christian faith, how that enriched your relationship with the Lord, and how being in Israel actually was a benefit to your faith and not a detriment.
Yeah. So since being back in the States and attending different congregations, I realized that so much of the roots of our faith, the Jewish roots of our faith, are so a part of my faith culture that I felt really homesick and also very uncomfortable going to these churches. And the way that I describe it is we are the bride of Christ, right? And Jesus, Yeshua, he is our husband, right? And if you are getting to know somebody in a relationship and they're of a different culture than you, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to invest in the culture, learn the traditions, eat the foods, all of these things. And I see this happening in the modern church where it's like, we are the bride of Christ, Jesus is our husband, but we don't want to have anything to do with his culture. We don't want to have anything to do with his background. All of these things. And it's really quite unfortunate. And so growing up in Israel, I got to really understand the culture of Christ and the culture that he grew up in, understand the holidays that he celebrated, that, when we take the sacraments, those come from a Passover Seder. And so being able to understand these things was a real privilege. And I really want to help Christians understand these things, not in a cheesy way that I feel like the church has done in the past,
Yeah.
but in a way that really just enriches their faith, because it really is like getting to know the culture of the person you love.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think this is an important issue to talk about, and unfortunately, it's not one that's going away anytime soon. So I think it's critical that we keep shining a light on this conversation and engaging in dialogue, because the only way, really, for people to change their minds or to change their perspective or to be exposed to truth is to have conversations, even uncomfortable conversations at times. So, Eden, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us. We appreciate your time.